Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and joining me in the studio today are two of our panelists you'll definitely recognize, and they've brought in a lot of really cool stuff to show off. So let's just jump in and have them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. So, Kay, we'll start with you.
I'm Kay Carnes, and I'm a Champaign County Master Gardener. And I volunteer out at Allerton Park a lot, and my specialties are heirloom vegetables and herbs.
Heirlooms and herbs. All right. Jen?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Nelson. I am an instructor with the Department of Crop Sciences at University of Illinois. You'll find me teaching vegetable gardening there. And I also have a blog, groundedandgrowing.com, and I love all things horticulture, especially houseplants and vegetables.
I was going to say, she has a tiny houseplant addiction. Anytime I call and say, hey, do you want to be on the show? She'll say, yeah, I'll run by and pick up something real fast and come in with a couple new plants. So she uses us as her excuse to feed that addiction.
You're my neighbor.
You're back in the classroom too, right?
Yep.
And thank you for braving this heat to come out today, because it is a scorcher out there.
It's nice in here, though.
It is. It is. We'll take it. Anything is better than out there.
Going out is going to be hard.
So, all right, Jen, we'll start with you. Whichever one do you want to start with first?
Well, given the scorching temperatures, and we haven't had any really good rain during all this, I brought a very nice example of what some people might see in their garden and wonder what in the heck is going on. This is called blossom end rot, and it's common when we have periods of dry weather, or in this case, this was in a container and it got a little too dry. Tomatoes can be really sensitive to that lack of moisture, because when the tomato's developing and all those cells are growing and dividing, they need calcium, and calcium has to travel with water. So if there's not enough water in the plant, that means there's not enough calcium. And so those areas that are trying to grow end up starting to die. And so it's on we call it blossom end rot, because here's where that connects to the plant. That's the stem end. So if you remember that in the case of a fruit used to be a flower. So the opposite end of the bottom of the tomato, what we would commonly call the bottom, is the end where the flower was coming out. People ask all the time, can I eat this? Is this going to hurt me? You can certainly eat it if you cut that off. I wouldn't obviously eat the nasty looking part, but this is a tomato that is a particular favorite in our family. This is called Cherokee Purple. It's an heirloom. It's usually, I just picked another one that was great big, probably about a pound.
Oh, wow.
So if it's just a small area, I would definitely cut it off. It kind of depends, how desperate are you for a ripe tomato? And I'm pretty desperate right now. I have lots of cherry tomatoes, but not a lot of my bigger tomatoes are pretty slow.
Interesting.
And
so, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, and also tomatoes won't set fruit in this super hot weather, so you might notice a gap in your fruit production.
Okay. So if you start to see tomatoes with that, is there a way to course correct? Can you water?
Yeah, and then it's like a snapshot in time. So at the point that those tomatoes were growing and it got too dry, they developed that. But if there's new tomatoes coming on and you keep the watering going, you won't see it again. I have tomatoes that are perfect on this plant, and a few tomatoes that look like this.
Interesting.
So some varieties are way prone to it too. So you have to kind of look at that as well, and you might decide it's just. I had one variety one year, and I can't remember which one it was, but no matter what I did, it just
didn't matter.
It just looked like this, and I'm like, yeah.
Now, what's the thing where I don't eat tomatoes, so this is kind of off my radar, but isn't it something if you water too much or too fast, they can get those cracks?
Yeah, depending how developed they are.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a fine line in there between keeping them moist
Well, usually cracking comes when it's been dry and you overwater and it grows fast.
Gotcha.
Yeah, or they're starting to turn. Yeah. And you hear about people running out because there's a storm coming. They're gonna pick all their tomatoes. I remember my mom sending me out to do that sort of thing, because that sudden deluge of water.
Got it. So consistency is the key,
right,
with tomatoes. Okay. Thank you very much, Jen. All right, Kay, we're to you.
Well, we'll continue with the tomato
Continuing with our tomatoes.
I brought this. This is one of my very favorite heirloom tomatoes, and it's called
It escaped you, didn't it? Is it aroma?
No, it's not.
No?
But I love it because it's really thick and meaty.
Okay, okay.
And so, but they will, and they're pretty hardy too. They don't crack a lot. They do get some blossom end rot if you water them too. But that's.
Now, how do you eat these, this type? Do you like them on sandwiches? Do you just put
Yeah,
them on a plate and
I
slice
use
them
these a
up?
lot for cooking because
okay.
they are so meaty. So I use them for like spaghetti sauce and things like that. It's Amish paste.
Amish paste. I knew it would. I tell you, I knew it would.
It's in there. It just takes a little time to get it.
Amish paste.
It's an Amish paste, and most of them are really a little bit bigger than this one, but this was the most perfect
nice.
one in the bunch. So
I know
bought
you
it.
are big into tomatoes. So how is your crop looking this year?
It's okay. I'm seeing a lot of cracking. I'm seeing some blossom end rot. I have been watering with a soaker hose, so you don't get the spray on everything. But they're doing pretty good.
It's just been a tough summer.
It has been.
It really has. Like we had a period in there where it was just like nice and the rain was coming regularly, and then it went right back to crazy, hot and dry.
Now it's so hot and dry, and it's 100 degrees today. So
yes.
I had the deer have been a problem this year at my house, and I had I had to replace a bunch of tomatoes. That's part of why they're so late. And then I've got nice stuff starting to ripen, and now it's so hot and dry. The deer,
they're coming.
They want the moisture.
Oh
They're
yes.
eating the tomatoes.
Oh yes. They've eaten almost all the apples off the tree, and I don't know if it's the deer or the rabbits, but something ate all the blooms off the mums. And it's just they're just stems.
That's it.
So yes,
I had a lot of rabbit issues early on when you first
Big
plant
ones,
stuff.
too.
I had cages around everything.
yes. I'm going to do that next year because
Yeah.
every year they eat me out of house and home.
I
We
know.
get peas and then we get nothing else. No apples,
Well,
no
I think
lettuce.
we're on like the second round
We
of
are.
babies.
We are,
too.
yes.
Because there's some really little guys I've
Yes.
seen in my yard.
Yes, for sure, for sure. So, okay, Jen, we're back. Oh, I'm sorry, Kay.
That's okay.
Oh, you
I
were
can
going to
do
cut
this-
into it. Oh, okay.
No, I got a bean here that's one of my very favorites, and it's called purple potted,
Ooh.
and it's a pole bean.
Okay.
So you get these really pretty purple long. They get much bigger than this, but this is when you would harvest them for cooking
Gotcha.
because they're a lot more tender. But the leaves have kind of a burgundy edge to them, and the stems are purple.
So it's
dark
pretty to
purple.
look at, too.
They are, and the flowers are gorgeous. They're this pink, like a magenta color.
We always grew the bush version of that growing up, and
Yeah.
we would always want to stand around to watch my mom cook them
Because they
turn
change
green.
colors. I get the kids. I'm like, all right, who wants to see the beans change colors?
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Too
do.
funny. How's the flavor? Good?
It's very good.
Yeah?
It's a nice bean flavor.
And it's a good size, too. That's
yeah,
a good
they
size
are.
bean.
These are pretty about standard. They're, like I said, these are young ones. So they can get real thick and big beans in them.
Do they ever get stringy if you
if
leave
you let
them
them
on?
go too long? And those I just save and use for seed. Save the seeds out of them.
Okay.
That's
Let
a good
them go
idea.
till they dry and then take the seeds out.
That's a really good idea because you never get them all, you know. So I'm gonna do that. Okay. All right, down. Jen, we're back to
Okay,
you.
what should we talk about next?
Dealer's choice.
All right.
What are you feeling
Well,
like?
I brought something that is in flower, and I love this houseplant because I literally don't do much except put it outside for the summer, and I think that really helps with the flowering. This is a Hoya.
Very pretty.
And it's got multiple, it's a variegated one. Some of the variegations got a little bit sunburned, but has a really cool flower. This is also called wax plant. So the flowers look like they're almost sculpted out of wax, and when they're freshly blooming, they smell like chocolate, which is pretty fun
That's
too.
an added bonus.
Right? It is an added bonus. And I've had this plant quite a while, and it's gotten really long. And part of one of the things people always ask is, how do you make sure the Hoya blooms? How do you get it to bloom? And my do nothing method, it seems to be working. But I'll tell you what, the mistake I made with another Hoya was I would start to see these sort of like long growths coming out, and I thought it looks like it's just not growing right, like it's not getting enough light. It looks like, oh, the leaves are so tiny, maybe I would just start to cut them off. And I started reading that this is a sign that this is going to produce a flower.
Oh,
so for years I was
hacking
completely
off
destroying it. Yes, the expert wrecks her own stuff. But what happens too is like this had a flower on it earlier, and I've also read to leave this because future flowers can come off of this. So I've just left that alone, and if it does forms a new one, fine. If not, it's not hurting anything. But also I've kept it in the same pot, and it prefers to be root bound, so it's doing fine. I had another one that has a different shaped leaf that I had for years and years and flowered, and the pot broke, and so I just put it in pretty much the same size pot, and it died. So it was really not liking being disturbed at all. But this is a great one for if you're forgetful about watering. It doesn't like to be super wet. Over the winter. Outside I water a bit more because it's actively growing, but kind of a set it and forget it kind of plant, and then everyone's like, wow, look, you've got a blooming plant. You must know what you're doing.
You're really on top of things.
But it's a waiting game too, because it's taken years for it to have multiple blooms on it in one summer.
I didn't realize Hoya was one of those plants where if you're into it, you're really into it. Like hosta folks. There are lots of Hoya folks out there. And then from that, I didn't know that there were so many different types of Hoya.
There's a ton. And I've got a few, but I've got one that's never flowered, but it's still growing and it seems happy. So maybe someday, for some of them, it seems to be like the age of the vine or the length of the vine influences whether it blooms and how much and all that stuff. But
I can't believe you were chopping off the...
I know.
For a long time.
Yeah, I felt really dumb.
It happens to the best of us. Like you said, even the experts make mistakes. And those are those moments where I'm just like, all right, I'm not doing too bad.
We're all human.
I'm not doing too bad.
We're all human.
All right, Kay, we're back to you.
Okay, well, let's see what I got in here.
In your handy dandy basket.
I wanted to talk a little bit about drying herbs. This is kind of a parsley, flat leaf parsley, which is one of my very favorites. But you don't want to dry it in heat because it just totally loses its flavor.
Gotcha.
So I dry it in the refrigerator. I cut the, got scissors here. You know, I just cut the individual flowers off, or leaves, and put them in a tray. And stick them. You know how you leave something open in the refrigerator?
Yes, you forget to cover it or whatever.
Well, you can make that work for you.
You can make it work in your advantage this time.
So I just put that on a tray in the refrigerator. It takes a while, but then it dries and it really holds the green and it holds the flavor really well.
Interesting.
I'm a real big fan of flat leaf parsley.
Do you grow your herbs in pots or are they in the ground?
They're
or
in the ground.
Yeah.
Mostly in the ground. And then I also have, this is kind of droopy, and this is kind of a little known herb. It's called Mexican oregano. And it's a member of the verbena family.
Okay.
But it's got kind of a spicy flavor, and it's used a lot in southwestern and Mexican cooking. That's quite popular in those areas.
Interesting.
But it's got kind of a strong odor to it, but it's kind of citrusy. It's not a true oregano.
Take a whiff. Have you ever had it?
I've heard of it, and I've never seen it.
It smells good. It smells like Italian.
Kind of oregano smell.
Yes, it's like making me think of pizza.
It's not an oregano. It's a member of the verbena family.
Wow, it smells really good.
It
so
does.
what dishes do you use this in? Like, do you use it with meats or
Mexican,
soups?
whatever.
Wow. That smells good. I like that. If it
use
tastes as good as it smells, I'm a fan.
It does, and it grows pretty quickly. You know, considering it's not going to overwinter
Oh,
unless you
I was
put
going to
it.
ask, is it an annual or
Yeah,
perennial?
well, it's a
Annual.
perennial, but it's a tender perennial,
Okay.
so it's
Gotcha.
not going to. It'll survive in your greenhouse
Sure,
probably.
but I could try to wrestle it into my garage maybe.
Yeah.
See if I'm any more successful with that than rosemary. I can't.
Oh.
Do you dry these the same way that you dry the parsley? Do you
No,
do
this I would just lay in a tray out in, you know, in the house.
in the air? Just leave it
and
open?
the same thing. This is sage. I just
Mm-hmm.
brought that. That's something you would dry. You know, just to cut the leaves off and dry in a tray.
Mm-hmm.
The only, let's see, what else have I
Some
got?
basil?
Basil. You don't want to put basil in the refrigerator because you're going to end up
Yep.
with the big.
Done it.
Yeah.
But the real reason I brought the basil is about harvesting it, because if you cut it, and I don't know if they can get us,
Yep, they've got a tight shot.
right here at the base, you can see there's two little tiny leaves coming out. So if you cut it like here, then this is going to produce another set of leaves in there. So you get a lot of basil
Yes.
from one plant by doing that, because it'll just keep reproducing, you know, growing at that node there.
We love a cut and come again.
Yeah, so I just go
situation.
through, and you don't want to let it flower because then the flavor changes. So
Okay.
it's good, kind of a good way to get rid of the flowers as they're
Interesting.
forming.
Now let me ask you this. I have a basket that it's set on the porch and it's grown and it's really full. It hasn't flowered, but it's getting to the point now where I need to harvest. Can you freeze?
Basil?
Mm-hmm.
No, you're going to
can't?
end up with
Mix it with-
the only thing you can do is dry
Just
it, air
dry it.
it.
Okay, okay.
Because the cold just turns it black and mushy.
Got it. Okay.
So-
I've got an
actually
abundance.
mixed mine with olive oil and put it in.
Yeah, you can.
And I chopped it up with olive oil and put it in ice cube trays.
Yeah, you could do that.
And it stays
Oh.
green.
Yeah, the oil would protect it.
But you got to be okay
And
with.
then it just goes straight to the
throwing
skillet.
Yeah, or thaw it out, and make pesto or whatever.
Interesting.
You like pesto?
I do.
Pesto freeze as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
but yes, pesto.
But
does.
not the actual
Right.
leaves.
It turns
Okay.
black.
And then I wanted to ask you too, do you grind everything when you're about to use it, or do you when you're storing it? Like, would you leave these whole? Does it maintain flavor longer?
Yeah, I do. I leave it whole. It depends on the herb, but most of them, I might crush it up a little bit.
Just a
if
little?
it's dry enough.
I tell you what, Kay, I think about you every time I open that spice cabinet right next to the stove.
You learn.
Every time I'm just like, man, if Kay was here right now, she'd be so
Well, see,
disappointed.
that's where my spice cabinet is, and that's why I just I have the dried herbs in big jars, and then I fill smaller jars. So,
Yes.
For the spice cabinet, so
Yes.
that they're not in there as long.
It's permanent now, Kay. I'm going to remember that forever. This is not good for the oregano. All right. Thank you so much. All right, Jen, we're back to you.
Okay, I brought kind of a recap of
Yes,
another.
an update.
An
We-
update.
roll the
an
update
updated, show and tell. So you might remember I was trying to see if it was true, and it was kind of inspired by John Bodensteiner, brought in some beautiful ginger plants that he had started from grocery store ginger, and he was telling me how to look at the roots and find ones that had like the start of some sprouts on them. So I found some, and I messed around with it at home in December, and nothing did anything. So I brought some into the greenhouse on campus, and they started growing, and they took a while. I had always wondered, I'd read that it takes anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks for them to really start growing, and that was really the case.
Wow.
It didn't do much. It even took a while in the greenhouse, but then I started noticing on this particular plant at home, like, what is coming out the side, and they're flower heads, and these are not the individual flowers. You can kind of see a dead one there. They're really pretty and kind of purpley when they're blooming, but there's one coming out up here too. I don't know if that means that it's like swan song and it's about to die, but I'm new at this. But you can see this was the original root from the grocery store, and it's put on quite a bit of new growth. So I need to figure out a pot that allows for more horizontal than deep growth. But
Maybe
so
like a succulent pot?
yeah, that's what I'm thinking, something like that. And so I guess if I want to harvest at some point, I've got nice fresh ginger
Nice
there.
fresh ginger.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So I also tried to grow ginger, except for I buried mine and it rotted. So when Jen walks in today with this, I immediately was like, okay, that's what I did wrong.
Try
Just
again.
Set it on top and let it do its thing.
Yeah, just think of like a, like I like a German iris. It's kind of how I did it. It was like set like maybe halfway in there, but the roots, once they get going, they grew through the flat on the greenhouse bench. They grew through the bottom of the table. Yeah, they were
ready. Once they took off, they took off.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to try that again. This time I won't bury it in the dirt. We've got a couple questions and a few minutes left. Let's see. Carrie from Effingham wants to know how to get crown vetch out of her flower bed. She said she's been pulling it all summer and it's relentless. And she wants to know if you guys have any suggestions or ways that she could get rid of this menace.
Well, I've had some, not crown vetch, but I've had some particularly stubborn plants, weeds and plants I planted on purpose and didn't do the proper research like I tell everyone else to do. But she might want to take just like a kind of one of those spongy craft brushes or paint brushes and do some Roundup or some other non-selective herbicide on the individual shoots that are coming up.
Oh, wow.
Because we were talking before the show, that's one, if you leave a bit behind, it's going to just grow more plants. Sometimes disturbing it makes the problem worse, at least initially.
Oh boy, you had a suggestion about digging it up or trying anyway?
Trying to, because you got to get all the root, and sometimes if you just pull it, you'll leave some of the root and it's useless.
Then it'll send up.
Like every little bit you leave is a new plant.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah, you tried to get rid of me? Well, watch this. So either try to dig the whole thing out or do it like a, what do you guys call it? A something application.
Like spot treatment.
Yeah, spot treatment. Okay.
It may take a few times, and you just kind of want to exhaust the roots that are remaining are going to only have so much energy to keep sending shoots up. So it's a battle of wills at this point.
Battle of will. Okay, we've got about 4 minutes left. This is from Magdalena Casper Ship. She has 2 questions. The first one is she's got a fuchsia plant that she said is not looking great. It's taking a turn for the worst. She has been watering it consistently and even gave it fertilizer, but it's just not looking up. It gets morning sun, and she wants to know if there's anything that she can do for that, or if you guys have any related fuchsia incidents.
All of my related fuchsia incidents have ended up with the fuchsia not doing well, so I will be honest. And everything I know about them says that they prefer a much cooler, wetter summer than what we typically have here. So maybe move to Washington State with your fuchsias.
Oh yeah, okay. And even with the morning sun, it's just been so hot.
So hot.
Yes, it's been awfully hot.
Okay, sorry about the fuchsia, but you might have to put something else right there. And then the second part of her question, she bought a pitcher plant and wants to know about overwintering it. Now, she says in here it's a floating pitcher plant, so we don't know if that is roots in the water or in a pot floating. But you did some research and found out that pitcher plants they're tender. Is that it?
Well, they're
maybe
a bog plant. There's some, I think. I'm not. This is kind of off of the top of my head. I think there are some that might be hardy in this area, but if they're floating, if it's a floating planter like we were thinking it might be, it's not going to survive. Like anything in a pot is not going to survive if it gets frozen solid. So you'd have to come up with some way to keep it from freezing and probably keep it cool but not frozen, and probably keep it pretty wet because it's a bog plant. So it's not going to want to just be like a canna thrown in the basement,
a box with some litter.
No,
you don't look at it until springtime.
Yeah, so that's what I would think. I would think if it's floating, you're not going to want to leave it where it's at.
Okay.
And so I could be completely wrong, but I just based on other things that I've attempted. That's what I would say.
So maybe a basement or crawl space, because the garage might even be too cold.
Maybe like if you're going to just keep it really moist and just check, you're going to have to check on it fairly often, I would think, if you're going to keep it moist to make sure it's not rotting.
Okay. All right. We've got just maybe a little over a minute or so left. I just wanted to ask how your yards and gardens are faring this year. Jen, how are things going?
Okay. We've had, like I said, some deer problems on our tomatoes recently because they're just thirsty and hungry, and I had a lot of problem with some fungal disease and bacterial wilt on my cucumbers, and my cantaloupe bit the dust. It just it just randomly wilted and died, and it was not dry, and so I'm pretty sure it was some sort of bacterial wilt. But I've never seen, I should have brought this for show and tell. I have never seen cucumbers that look so horrible in my life. I am used to sometimes having them get kind of little fungus, like lesions on the leaves. But I had a couple of nice looking cucumbers, smaller, what they called Asian types that have real thin skin. And then like I went back to harvest more, and they were just covered in these brown spots, like almost like completely solidly brown. I think they're still edible if I peel them. And I'm desperate for a homegrown cucumber.
How bad do you want it?
But I think it's from water. I think some of the irrigation for the lawn is getting it, and I think was spreading it by splashing because it was watering from overhead.
I had cucumbers that they're doing really well, and I get gigantic ones. And it's a cucumber that I grew last year, and even the big ones were really tasty and sweet. And this year, even little ones are bitter.
We're out of time. Thank you so much for watching. If you got a question, send it in, yourgarden@gmail.com. We'll see you next time. Good night.